Hi, this is Dr. Devon Almond, author of Cause to Carry Along One's Way. Let's begin. The original essence of the word leadership refers to a cause to carry along one's way. When we think of leadership, we tend to firstly think in terms of interpersonal and positional leadership. That is, in relationship to other people and environments. Yet, beneath and beyond, or deeper and higher than this leader-follower association, is personal leadership. Personal leadership is about yourself first. Through this lens, leadership is about managing energies, first in ourselves, then in others, and becoming a more integrated person. We ask, what underlies your ship? This question applies to your leadership, along with your relationships, friendships, hardships, and so on. When you consider this question, you're not only inquiring into the surface structures of what floats your boat, but you're really inquiring into the deep structures that anchor your life. When we're anchored in our deepest, highest, most generative selves, we step into a space that is both deeply personal and unique, and highly transpersonal and connective. In this way, personal leadership is at once all about you and not about you at all. As we anchor in the ships of ourselves, we outflow into relationship with the world. We step into the world from who we really are, from the space of our gifts. Then we offer these gifts, which are both unique and connective to the world. When we offer these uniquely connective gifts to the world, we also receive these gifts ourselves. Whether our gifts are embraced by other people is a secondary consideration. Our life is an offering. Can you feel the urge to offer more? Unoffered love is our suffering. Our ungiven gifts clench as stress. You and I are love's means. This moment is our offering. We will die fully given, or we will die ungiven, still waiting. Feel into the poignant call offered by spiritual writer David Data. By inquiring into what underlies your ship, we tap into the essence of who we really are. Only from this uniquely connective space can we really outflow our offerings into the world. When we're unwilling or unable to offer our gifts, we often contract ourselves into a narrow, blocked wall of life. We shrivel into a space that we would have been better off leaving behind. Our personal leadership wails as the fixed mindset of self-protection prevails. In this state, we don't want to leave the comfort of the shore. Our ship never sets sail. We hold on to antiquated dreams and cling to the trailing edge of life. The epitome of the trailing edge of life is mediocrity. Interestingly, the original essence of the word, mediocrity, refers to starting to climb a rugged mountain and stopping midway. While how we start anything matters, so too does our resilience and persistence to carry along our way. For each dream that we embrace as we carry along our way up the mountain, other dreams die. If you follow every dream, you might get lost. Cutting off circulation to dreams that you've outgrown is an essential attribute of personal leadership. Consider how the original essence of the word decision refers to cutting off these alternatives. Cultural anthropologist Carlos Castaneda reminds us that if we come to a fork in the road, we should ask, which path is most hard? To cut off the path with least heart is to grow into the leading edge of life. When we're guided by our deepest, highest, most generative selves, we're drawn to living on the edge. Not in a reactive, dangerous way in which we look to the past to predict the future, but in a responsive, generative way. Generativity refers to creating origins or producing birth. When we live into our leading edge, we birth possibilities that cohere with our uniquely connective gifts. We step into growth, into who we really are, and who we might become. We become more and more of who we already are. When we live from a space that's just beyond our current edge, our center of gravity, the inner space where we live for most of the time, expands as we grow into new edges. Growth mindsets lead us in a way that goes just beyond our current edge. Day after day, week after week, month after month, and so on. This path of life is a path of generative learning. Personal leadership propels learning. One step each day for a year in either the direction of the leading edge of generative learning or the trailing edge of degenerative learning, is not simply 365 steps in a certain direction. Each step etches a mark on a path that strengthens each time we take another step in the same direction. Spiritual writer Henry David Thoreau reminds us that just as a single footstep will not make a path on the earth, so a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kinds of thoughts we wish to dominate our lives. Stated differently, philosopher Aristotle tells us that we are what we repeatedly do. In fact, up to 95% of our thoughts, feelings, and actions are a result of learned habits that we live on a daily basis. Like compound interest that accumulates day after day, the path we walk each day becomes the path of life. This path, which reveals the habits that make our character, is like the clothes we wear. Interestingly, the original essence of the word habit refers to just that, the clothes we wear. The clothes we wear can be a metaphor for human development. Children are typically dependent on their parents to select the clothes they wear. As we grow from dependency to independency, our voices influence the clothes we wear. Alas, we embrace a multiplicity of voices to embrace interdependency. Dependency, independency, and interdependency are three sequential stages in human development. These stages are life orientations. As we grow, our values evolve from dependency of hereditary values to the independency of social values, to the interdependency of universal values. Hereditary values are dependent on our early home environment. These pre-personal values are unconsciously inherited. Social values extend beyond and are independent from our home environment. These personal values are anchored in choice. Universal values are generative, transpersonal, and refined choice and a virtue. Generative universal values are virtuous across the world. Pioneering researchers in positive psychology identify 6 virtues that contribute to the habits of our character. These transpersonal values include wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, moderation, and transcendence. Wisdom includes the character strengths of creativity, curiosity, judgment, love of learning, and perspective. Courage encompasses bravery, persistence, honesty, and zest. Humanity consists of love, kindness, and social intelligence. The theme of justice includes teamwork, fairness, and leadership. Moderation encompasses forgiveness, modesty, prudence, and self-control, while transcendence includes appreciation of beauty, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. Love is a theme that weaves these virtues together. But how does love relate to personal leadership? Let's explore this relationship through a classic book originally published in the 1960s. Psychiatrist M. Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled clearly differentiated between false love and real love. The romantic nature of false love involves falling in and falling out of love. In this happen-chance orientation of love, we are passive recipients and givers in a need-based exchange. We are dependent on the other in a degenerative way. The origins of this pre-personal love, which is independent of choice, is immediate physical desire, independent of longer-term discipline. Yet deficiency-based biological needs, mixed with emotional desire and whimsical states of infatuation, represent a shaky foundation to support a generative cause to carry along one's way. The dangers of isolated lust and momentary infatuation is illuminated through perennial philosophies. For instance, various Eastern philosophies relay the perils of lust, greed, and anger to human development. The same cautions can be drawn from psychology with its origins in behaviorism, which sought to address only the ill-fated behaviors or problems in humanity at the expense of transpersonal potentialities. False love is often associated with conditional and romantic love. With this orientation of love, the other is viewed merely as a parasite to fill one's needs. This object reference point contrasts the subject reference point of real love. Spiritual writer Jiddu Krishnamurti gracefully communicated false love in terms that people want to be loved because they do not love. Meanwhile, literary philosopher Ayn Rand relayed that to say I love you, one must first know how to say the I. And so we ask in a generative way, what underlies your ship? The generative development of ego is an integral, yet often neglected element to human development. The Dalai Lama reminded us that one type of ego is based on concern for self and satisfying desires, while another ego is concerned for others and serving. The latter ego is anchored in a sense of self, self-confidence, and self-love, what we might call sufficiency. The voice of a sufficiency-based values come from an unconditional inner space that says now that, whereas the voice of deficiency-based needs come from a conditional outer space that says if then. Love in the outer world of the active life relies on love in the inner world of the contemplative life. This real love born within the contemplative life is then actualized in the active life. As philosophers, sages, and mystics communicate, outer depends on inner. Real love is the polarity of false love. The essence of real love is the conscious intentional will for human development, defined in The Road Less Traveled as consciously extending the self for one's own and another's spiritual growth. This sufficiency-based, consciously chosen process genuinely changes the interior of both the lover and the beloved. This interior change is a transformation or changing of forms, whereas the unconscious nature of false love is directed towards entropic ends. The consciousness of real love supports an enlivening direction of human development. Real love, like our service in the world, involves becoming more and more of who we already are, then extending that being and becoming in service of the world. A conscious orientation to love, as well as our leading and learning, derives from our deepest, highest, most generative selves. Our deepest, highest, most generative selves grow beneath and beyond, or deeper and higher than the surface structures of our active lives. This generative love is the courage to consciously unite fragments and to embrace its sufficiency-based place as a starting point. In contrast, degenerative love is allowing people to get away with leading, learning, and loving in fragmented, unconscious manners. Both generative love and degenerative love support people's cause to carry along one's way, but only generative love supports a generative cause to carry along one's way. Looking only to the outside for effects and conditions to direct our way overlooks the cause. We simply look at what is going on and how to carry along our way. By also peering into the inside deeper and higher than condition, we inquire into the why and the who that underlies the ships of our lives. On the surface of life, we see in a what is immediate in our worlds. We are oriented toward physical outcomes in fragmented, unconscious manners. Going a little deeper, we touch into how we approach life. We notice subtle processes and often seek to simply enjoy the journey of life. As we delve deeper and higher into the space of generative love, we develop the courage to consciously unite fragments, first in ourselves, then in others. We ask why we are carrying along our particular ways and who we are in our inner essence. In inquiring into what underlies your ship, you might ask, who is the self? What anchors my life? What are my uniquely connective gifts? How might these gifts serve the world? These generative questions touch into the uniquely connective core of who we really are. The structures of generativity are outlined through 3 life orientations. What underlies your ship? The degenerative life orientation of stage 1 asks, what? The transitional life orientation of stage 2 asks, how? The generative life orientation of stage 3 asks, why and who? At the core of these concentric circles rests our deepest, highest, most generative selves. This generative life orientation is home to generative love. That is, the courage to unite, to consciously unite fragments and to embrace this sufficiency-based place as a starting point. From this starting point rests an ultimate cause to carry along one's way. The word ultimate recognizes that each circle also has a cause that reflects its stage of human development and life orientation. The cause to carry along one's way for the degenerative life orientation is dependency-oriented, based on hereditary values and oriented toward a physical outcome. The cause to carry along one's way for the transitional life orientation is independency-oriented, based on social values and oriented toward a subtle process. Let's apply these three life orientations to work. For the degenerative life orientation, work is viewed as taking a job. For the transitional life orientation, we view work as seeking a career. For the generative life orientation, we view work in terms of calling a vocation. These three life orientations reveal three life work orientations. Three life work orientations. Taking a job. With this what orientation, work is a means to an end. It is outcome-based. We depend on work to support life. Life and work are fragmented. Considering work as a necessity for life, we take jobs that don't interfere with our personal lives. Held hostage by an occupational lens, work is viewed in terms of what we receive, such as pay and benefits to support life outside of work. This orientation is reflected in the original essence of the word job, that is, the torture of devouring a chunk of work. Seeking a career. With this how orientation, work is process-oriented toward a general endpoint. This orientation is reflected in the original essence of the word career, that is, a carriage trying to get to the end as fast as it can. Valuing independence, success, and prestige in life and work, we are interested in upward mobility, raises, promotions, and the social standing that derives from work. With life and work becoming more and more integrated, our personal identification in life is viewed through a professional lens, calling a vocation. Work is integral to life with this why and who orientation. Our personal identity, self-expression, and fulfillment are viewed through a vocational lens. Work itself is meaningful for life. We modify working duties and relationships to nurture further meaning in our life work. Integrating life and work, we are typically more satisfied with life and work compared to the other orientations. The original essence of the word calling or vocation refers to a voice that's calling you. These three life-work orientations reveal three distinct orientations to our service in the world. With the degenerative orientation, our service to the world doesn't recognize our uniquely connective gifts. We begin to touch into these gifts with the transitional orientation. In the generative orientation, our uniquely connective gifts direct our way. With the degenerative, taking a job orientation, our way is directed by deficiency-based opportunities external to ourselves. Our cause to carry along one's way comes from what's available in the external world. Our course is directed from the outside. Our work is dependent on available employment opportunities. Wearing this occupational lens produces a narrow view of life work. Our cause is anchored in degenerative love. With the transitional, seeking a career orientation, we direct our way through both sufficiency-based possibilities and deficiency-based opportunities. An inner compass arises to direct one's cause to carry along one's way. Wearing this professional lens produces a broad view of life work. Our course is directed by one's pursuit of independency. With this orientation, our cause, while still anchored in degenerative love, begins to touch into our more generative selves. With the generative, calling a vocation orientation, our way is refined as our cause is directed by an inner voice that calls us to integrate into the exterior world. Our inner and outer integrate as we refine our service in the world. We are guided by sufficiency-based possibilities to materialize our uniquely connective gifts in the world. This orientation is anchored in generative love. The poet Khalil Gibran beautifully illustrates this generative love. When love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep, and when his wings enfold you, yield to him, though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you. And when he speaks to you, believe in him, though his voice may shatter your dreams. Gibran, who also writes that work is love made visible, continues, when you love, you should not say God is in my heart, but rather I am in the heart of God. And think not that you can direct the course of love, for if love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. Love has no desire but to fulfill itself. The three orientations to life work often, but not always reflect the evolution of cultures and societies, from 1. The physical labor of manual workers so prevalent in the industrial age, to 2. The subtle thinking of knowledge workers so prevalent in the informational age, to 3. The deeply and highly subtle essence of creative workers so present in today's emerging creative age. That is, from body to mind to spirit, with each lens transcending the details and including the essence of earlier lenses. When we transcend and include what was earlier the whole of life, we see that the earlier whole is only a fragment of the new whole of life. We cut off the trailing edges of life and grow into new leading edges. By growing beneath and beyond, or deeper and higher than who we were earlier, we become more and more of who we already are. We reveal our inner essence, our deepest, highest, most generative selves and its uniquely connective gifts. We surface generative love. When generative love is surfaced in work, we show up in very, very different ways. Work is not what we do, but who we are. It is our service to the world. Consider the parable of the bricklayers. A man stumbled onto a building site for a church. 3 bricklayers were preparing for a day of work. The man asked each bricklayer what they were doing. The first bricklayer said, "I am laying bricks." The second bricklayer responded, "I am making a brick wall." And the third bricklayer exclaimed, "I am building a house of God." All 3 workers were doing the same task. However, each worker brought a different orientation to the task. For the degenerative, taking a job worker, the task was outside of the self. For the worker was merely doing a job. Compare that orientation with the generative, calling a vocation worker, who is embedding an inner essence into the work. As generative love is surfaced, our circle of care, concern, and compassion expands. Imagine for a moment the care, concern, and compassion held by each worker. Also imagine the quality that each worker brought to the task. The parable continues to explain how the workers with the more encompassing life-work orientations also brought a greater effectiveness to the work. The more encompassing circles of care, concern, and compassion suggest that a grander wholeness is brought to both life and work. This grander wholeness includes the wholeness of the heart. Perennial philosophies illuminate this cause to carry along one's way. Consider the Buddhist text, the Dhammapada. Never neglect your work for the sake of another's, however great that need. Your work is to find your work and then attend to it with all of your heart. Similarly, the Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita, advises, to do your work is to do the work of God. To do another's work is to do the work of a slave. Personal leadership involves identifying and applying our uniquely connective gifts in service to the world. Each man has an aptitude. Do your work. 'Tis clownish to insist on doing all with one's hands, as if every man should build his own clumsy house, forge his hammer, and bake his dough. But he is to dare what he can do best, not help others as they would direct him, but as he knows his helpful power to be. To do otherwise is to neutralize all those extraordinary talents distributed among men. This advice from spiritual writer Ralph Waldo Emerson illuminates the courage necessary for a generative cause to carry along one's way. Recall that courage encompasses bravery, persistence, honesty, and zest. Interestingly, the original essence of the word courage derives from heart. Also recall that when you come to a fork in a road, choose the generative path of the heart. The cause to carry along one's way is the path of living through an open, refined heart in which we are not merely the effect of life's course. Of course, there is not simply a singular right path. Personal leadership involves uncovering the generative paths right for you. This path is cultivated and opened day after day in a conscious direction. This generativity means uncovering what underlies your ship. This generativity relies on the whole heart of courage. In closing, let's settle into this lengthy excerpt from existential psychologist Rollo May's classic book, The Courage to Create. Shall we seize the courage necessary to preserve our sensitivity, awareness, and responsibility in the face of radical change? Shall we consciously participate, on however small a scale, in the forming of a new society. We are called upon to do something new, to push into a forest where there are no well-worn paths and from which no one has returned to guide us. To live into the future means to leap into the unknown, and this requires a degree of courage for which there is no immediate precedent and which few people realize. This courage is not the opposite of despair. It is the capacity to move ahead in spite of despair. If you do not express your own original ideas, if you do not listen to your own being, you will have betrayed yourself. Also, you will have betrayed our community in failing to make your contribution to the whole. The most prevalent form of cowardice in our day hides behind the statement, "I didn't want to become involved." A chief characteristic of this creative courage is that it requires a centeredness within our own being, without which we would feel ourselves to be a vacuum. That is why we must always base our commitment in the center of our own being, or else no commitment will be ultimately authentic. Whereas moral courage is the righting of wrongs, creative courage is the discovery of new forms, new symbols, and new patterns on which a new society can be built. Thank you for listening.